You know, it's funny. Not funny. The feeling I had when the jury read the verdict was a combination of first relief and then very intense sadness and grief. I think that at some level the year has been so devastating in so many ways, so grief-stricken and anguished that the reality of the loss of this man, this human being who was loved, who had a mother he cried out for and had brothers and a daughter and walked this earth and had dreams and aspirations and things he wanted to do with his life and struggles that he got through, and that is gone and we can't get that back, hit me really hard, almost more than anything else in the moment. Just the fact that he should be alive still.
I'm with you. I had tears that were inside that I had to do TV, so I couldn't have them out, but I wasn't. It was a combination of tears of relief and tears of sadness, but you're absolutely right. It was definitely tears. Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joy. That was a great hour. Thank you very much. And good evening from New York. I am Chris Hayes. This afternoon, as we were just discussing, millions of people, tens of millions of people, I would actually hazard, across the country were holding their breath, feeling fear, anxiety, even dread about what the outcome might be in the trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. Somewhat absurdly, as many noted, given the fact that we all watched what happened to George Floyd last May in excruciating and unbearable detail, all 9 minutes and 29 seconds of it. It was an act so offensive and so gruesome that it captivated the consciences of those people there, of people just passing by at that moment who didn't know each other. They're just going to the store, and they all saw this, and it struck their conscience, and you could see the look on their faces of consternation and worry, human concern. They all tried in their own way to intervene to save George Floyd's life as it was snuffed out in front of them. And the video of what happened was so awful, so heinous, it precipitated the largest civil rights protests in a generation. Millions and millions took the streets in cities large and towns small. But of course, we all know the history. We've seen the Rodney King trial and its aftermath. Because of that, we all know the outcome of this trial was not a foregone conclusion. It could have gone either way. Today, the jury finished deliberating. They reached a verdict after 11 hours. At 4:04 p.m. Central Time in Minneapolis, Hennepin County Judge Peter Cahill returned to the courtroom moments later. The 12 jurors filed in, and everyone held their breath.
Please be seated. Members of the jury, I understand you have a verdict.
The judge read out the 3 counts against Derek Chauvin, and the guilty verdicts reached on each one. The hushed crowd outside the courthouse watched along on their smartphones. In that moment, the alleged murderer of George Floyd became the murderer of George Floyd, officially, in the eyes of the justice system. The thing that we knew all along was true, confirmed in that jury room. The judge revoked Derek Chauvin's bail, and he was taken into custody, handcuffed, and led out of the courtroom. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and the prosecution team spoke outside the courtroom just after the verdict, calling the outcome of the trial the first step toward justice, highlighting the people who really made it happen.
Now the cause of justice is in your hands. And when I say your hands, I mean the hands of the people of the United States. The people who stopped and raised their voices on May 25th, 2020, were a bouquet of humanity. A phrase I stole from my friend, Jerry Blackwell. A bouquet of humanity. Old, young, men and women, black and white. Why did they stop? They didn't know George Floyd. They didn't know he had a beautiful family. They didn't know he had been a great athlete. And they didn't know he was a proud father or that he had people in his life who loved him. They stopped and raised their voices, and they even challenged authority because they saw his humanity. They stopped and they raised their voices because they knew that what they were seeing was wrong.
Barack and Michelle Obama released a statement about the trial, saying in part, today, a jury in Minneapolis did the right thing. But if we're being honest with ourselves, we know that true justice is about much more than a single verdict in a single trial. True justice requires we come to terms with the fact that Black Americans are treated differently every day. It requires us to recognize that millions of our friends, family, and fellow citizens live in fear that their next encounter with law enforcement could be their last. It requires us to do the sometimes thankless, often difficult, but always necessary work of making the America we know more like the America we believe in. Early this evening, President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris addressed the nation, calling for Americans to continue the work and movement sparked by Floyd's death.
Today, we feel a sigh of relief. Still, it cannot take away the pain. A measure of justice isn't the same as equal justice. This verdict brings us a step closer, and the fact is, we still have work to do. We still must reform the system.
I can't breathe. Those were George Floyd's last words. We can't let those words die with him. We have to keep hearing those words. We must not turn away. We can't turn away. We have a chance to begin to change the trajectory in this country. It's my hope and prayer that we live up to the legacy.
Whatever bit of relief or solace comes from this verdict, it is inescapably the case that it is not the end of this story. George Floyd is still not with us. He should be alive today, and that will never be changed. That is always true in our criminal justice system. No trial can bring anyone back ever. This one cannot. George Floyd's family will live with the grief and the ripple effects of those 9 minutes and 29 seconds for the rest of their lives. It is also the case that George Floyd and the reaction to his murder across the country, indeed across the world, are part of a broader story about race, policing, and power. Power in this country. And that is a story as present as it has ever been tonight on the streets as people memorialize George Floyd, celebrate, and tomorrow as people across the world look at this verdict and what it says about the America we love.